The Murder Hole Road was a road between Coleraine and Limavady, and it was a great hideout for bands of highwaymen, and they would jump on unwary travellers and they would rob them and then spend the ill-gotten gains. But this is a particular story about one of them called Cushy Glen. Now, Cushy Glen was a ne'er-do-well, that's what he would have been called. And he was a bit of a drunkard as well. And when he was drinking in a tavern one night, he drank so much that he didn't know that a recruiting sergeant from the army had dropped a coin into his tankard. And when Cushy Glen got to the bottom and saw the coin, he knew that he had been shanghaied. And that meant that he had accepted the king's money and he would have to serve in the army. And sometimes nowadays you see tankards with glass bottoms on them. And the reason for that was that a man could see whether there was a coin dropped on the bottom of it and whether he had accidentally joined the army. But anyway, Cushy Glen had to join the army, was not a happy man. And he didn't waste his time there. What he did was he would watch out who had money, who had not, playing cards. He didn't play cards himself, but he watched who won and he would steal the money. And eventually he was caught out and he was discharged. And he was told never to darken the doors of an army recruiting office again. Well, he went about his usual thing around the countryside, stealing from unwary travellers, from peddlers. There were a lot of peddlers around there as well, around then. But when his brother James was hanged in Derry jail for the same thieving but also killing somebody, Cushy decided that he would be scarce for a while. And it was during this time when he wasn't really about the sort of business, and his fellow highwaymen were wondering what was up with him. And if they'd waited a wee while, they would have found out, because he met Kitty Glen. And they say that like attracts like. Well, Kitty was a thief in her own way, but had never been caught. Oh, she could take anything out of the purse of a woman passing by and they wouldn't even know. You could be wearing a brooch or a necklace, and when you got home it would be gone and you wouldn't know. Katie was so light-fingered like that. So the two of them set up house in a place called Sconce. And the time came and she said, you know what, she said, I don't want you working with those other men again. Let them do their own bad work, she said, because we can make far more on our own. And she got this plan that if he would go to Bridge Street in Coleraine and he would listen to the farmers maybe after the market, or he would listen in the pubs, and he would know who had money and who had not. And before they would leave, he would get up and leave, and he would make his way back to the Murder Hole Road, because that was the only way back that they could go. And he would stay and lie in wait there behind the bushes, and whenever the unwary traveller came along, he would jump out, scream and frighten the person and frighten the horse, because he never shot at the person, he always shot at the horse. It was a bigger target, and though he had learned to shoot in the army, he was never a very good shot. But then, whenever he had caught the man had fallen to the ground, he got his knife and he just slit his throat. And then Kitty would help him to bury the corpses. And the corpses were buried all along the Murder Hole Road. One night, he got his comeuppance, because there was a young trader in Coleraine, Harry Hopkins was his name, and he had made quite a lot of money, And Cushy was looking at this, and he eyed him and he said, "That's my next target." And he went and he hid. But he had very good eyesight, and even in the dark, he saw the bushes shaking, and he took out his pistol. And as soon as Cushy came out, he shot him dead. And he went on and he reported it to the authorities in Limavady. And the next day, Cushy Glen's body was lifted. But they knew where he lived. So they said, "We'll go and we'll get his companion, Kitty." And they went along to the wee house at Sconce. And when they got there was no smoke rising from the chimney. The door was lying open, and they went in. Kitty was gone, and all of the stuff that they had stolen over the years was gone too. Now it's said that he haunts the Murder Hole Road, which is now known as the Windy Hill Road because it winds around the Windy Hill. My husband's grandfather worked in a garage in Derry. He was a mechanic. And one of the men there did a lot of driving. Well, in those days, very few people had cars. And this man was called Mickey. And Mickey had to take a businessman to Coleraine for a meeting. But when they got to the part where the Murder Hole Road was, a man jumped out, screaming and shouting, and Mickey braked that hard that he almost slid under the ditch, and the sweat was lashing off him. And he grabbed a torch and he got out and he started to look around. There was no body under the car, there was no body in the ditch, there was none in the road, but a horse and cart came along and it had a lamp on the side. He stopped the man, said, "Do you need help?" And Mickey said, "Well," he said, "I think I knocked down somebody because," and he told him the whole story. And the man sort of smiled and he said, "Well," he said, "go on your way." He said, "That was just Cushy Glen." He said, "That's often happened on this road. Don't be afraid." So Mickey got into the car, managed to get it turned around and went on his way. But the man beside him was still shivering and shaking. And he said, "What's wrong with you?" And he said, "Would you look behind?" And of course, Mickey pulled on the brakes and stopped the car and he looked behind. Nothing. And the man said, "Who's that on the back seat?" And Mickey looked and he said, There's nobody there." He said, "There's somebody there and he's looking at me. He's bored a hole under the back of my neck." And the man took out a pair of rosary beads and started to pray. And they reached Derry, but the man never forgot that and never travelled to Coleraine again along that road. So it looks as if Cushy Glen is still appearing to travellers. And if you happen to go along that road at night, looks like a nice new road now at the minute, but don't be afraid if suddenly something jumps out in front of you and screams.